I love going to the thrift stores and seeing what things I can find. It's always like a treasure hunt for me, so I always have fun and enjoy doing that. And I have found several things recently that I wanted to DIY with and repurpose, and I think all of these turned out great. I did save the best for last, so be sure that you stick around for that one. You don't want to miss that one, I promise. It turned out absolutely beautiful. Thank you for stopping by Lavender and Lace. I'm Alicia, and welcome back to all of my viewers that come and see me each week. And welcome if you are new and you have just discovered me. Thank you for stopping by. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy this content, and I hope you will consider subscribing if you haven't done that already. And let's get started with today's projects. I found this wooden box and it reminded me of a high-backed chair actually, but it was pretty well made. So I decided to pick this one up and of course redo this to match my decor and my style. And I believe this one was $5, so that was a pretty good price point. And I left the hangers on the back just in case I decide that I want to hang this up to display it. But for right now, it's actually going to go in my kitchen on the counter, and I'm going to use this as our mailbox, I guess you could say. So I just moved all of the stickers that they had on the back, and I used my paint scraper to just remove that snowman that they had on the front. And that removed very well. It popped off pretty easily. And then I just used my little heat gun to help me remove some of that glue that was on there, just to remove some of the pasteboard that had came off the back of the snowman, and just used my paint scraper to get all of that off. I didn't really care if this was a very smooth surface because I'm not actually going to be painting this part of the box. And then I just made sure to clean everything off really well, just to remove any of, I had some glitter and things in the bottom of these little spaces, and I just wanted to clean that off really well and get this ready to paint. And I used my Waverly chalk paint in the color Sandstone, and almost said colored. I painted the front and the sides of my box, and this did take 3 coats. I had hoped I would be able to kind of sand this down, but I knew I wouldn't be able to sand each little individual compartment, so I just decided to paint that. It was pretty therapeutic for me the day I was working on this project, and I enjoyed painting that, but it did take a little bit. And to get the inside sections painted, I just used one of the longest paint brushes that I had. And I did just a couple of coats on the inside, as I'm not going to be able to see that very much. I just had to take my time with painting all of these inside sections to make sure that I got the coverage that I wanted. And then to just distress my mailbox, I just took a baby wipe and some of my antique wax and just went over the entire surface that I had painted. And this just gives it that very vintage, weathered look that I like so much in all of my projects and my home decor. You could totally skip this step if you do not like the distress look. It's totally up to you, whatever you want to do for your projects. And you can see there, I did paint about 2 inches down on each of the sections. I will be adding some scrapbook paper to those in just a little bit, and I wanted to make sure that none of that blue or red was showing. So just as a precaution, I did paint a little bit of those. And I just measured each of my sections to know the sizing that I needed to cut my scrapbook paper. And I picked up this pack from Hobby Lobby, and I love all of the designs that this one has. And I just chose one that I thought looked like spring and into summer maybe, because I will be leaving this piece out year round. And I just cut down all of the pieces that I would need to fit in each of the compartments of my mailbox. And I did a dry fit with each of those before I glued them down, and I did have to trim off just a little bit extra of that scrapbook paper just to make sure that it would fit in there nicely. And to glue those down, I just used some of my Eileen's tacky glue and a paintbrush to smear that over the back and just get a thin layer. And I just placed each piece of my cardstock into those compartments and used my little silicone spatula or whatever that I had on hand that was long enough to reach all the way down into the bottom of each of those sections to make sure that my cardstock was applied and that it would stick well, and just to give that glue a chance to adhere to all of the surfaces there. Just repeated that for all of the sections, and that largest piece I had to do 2 separate pieces of cardstock just to make sure I had all of that covered. And I used my brayer on that top section just to make sure I had everything put down nicely and to remove any of those ridges that I might have from any of the glue on the back of my paper. And then just to blend everything in, I took my Waverly Antique Wax once again with one of my small chip brushes, just went around all of the edges of the cardstock and each of the crevices where the box joined with that paper, just so I could blend in all of those edges and the joins. I had so much fun working on this piece. It was just a lot of fun for me to see how this was changing as I was painting and adding this cardstock, and I just love the finished product. I can't wait for you guys to see that. And I had one of these decorative pieces in my stash from Dollar Tree, and I thought this one looked like a flower, and I just love the design on this one. Just to age that a little bit more, I took my antique wax once again and went over all of those raised areas just so they would pop a little bit and have a little bit more definition to them. And to help me get this centered on the front of my mailbox, I just took my ruler and marked the center of that. And I applied my decorative piece with just some hot glue. I also thought about adding a decal that said "You've got mail," or some kind of vintage saying decal or something to add to this. So if you find a piece like this, you could absolutely do that, whatever that would fit your style and your preference. And I wanted to elevate this a little bit because I wanted to put a drawer underneath of this. So I had some of these tumbling tower blocks, and these were actually this color, this dark brown color, so I didn't have to do anything to those. I just took some E6000 and some hot glue and added those to each of the corners of my mailbox. And I grabbed one of these wooden boxes that I have in my stash pretty much all the time. I get these at Dollar Tree, and I just painted this with a couple of coats of that sandstone color. And I also grabbed a couple square beads that I have, and you can get these on a string at Dollar Tree as well. And I just gave those 2 coats of that same color chalk paint. And I also distressed my wooden box with my Waverly Antique Wax, just so this would look like it was one piece and it came together this way. And I also distressed those small little beads, added a piece of that same cardstock to the bottom of my drawer, and I did the antique wax around each of the corners of that as well. And to make my drawer pull, I just took another one of those tumbling tower blocks and glued that to my box with a couple of those beads. And this one is finished. I absolutely love how this one turned out. This is going to just allow me to hopefully have a more organized area in my kitchen for our mail and just some other things to go in that drawer. But what do you guys think about this one? Here's an easy way that you can just change the look of any candle holders that you might find at the thrift store. I found these and I picked these up because I really like that wood finish on the top. I'm not sure if it's solid wood, probably not, but I just thought it was really pretty. And of course, the base did not match my decor. So I will be changing that up just a little bit. And this is such a super easy process that you can do that with a lot of different items and different materials that you have. And of course, I wanted to clean these up really well before I started working with them. And I just took some washi tape and taped off that upper portion so I won't get any paint on that wood surface. And when I picked these up, I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to redo these, but it has been a while since I have done any crackle, so I decided to do that with these candle holders. And you can use a lot of different things to achieve that crackle effect, but I always use the Elmer's glue because I get good results with that every time that I use that. So I applied a thin layer of that Elmer's glue and I did work in sections just so I would be sure to get a good crackle effect and that glue wouldn't dry too quickly on me. And once I had my glue applied, I did a pretty liberal amount of my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster. And when you're doing this, you don't want to go back over the area where you have already put paint, as it will kind of pull that up and it will remove that paint that you have already put down. So I just did that in a small area, and then I take my heat gun and I did my low setting for this. Sometimes that higher setting will make your paint kind of bubble up, and I don't want that effect. I want these crackles that you get, and I always love watching this process. I didn't even really speed this up for you guys. You can see how fast that those crackles will start appearing in your paint. This is just a very easy technique and a super simple way that you can change the look of any decor piece that you want to add to your home. I love, love, love the way this one turned out. And you can do different techniques with that glue to get different crackles. If you dry your glue a little bit first and then put your paint on, you will get smaller cracks in your paint. I like these big kind of chunky cracks in mine, so I didn't let my glue dry at all before I applied my paint. And then I just removed my washi tape that I had put down, and I can easily go back and do any touch-ups that I need to. And I'm using a product that I have never used before. It is the clear wax sealant from Waverly. After I applied this, I read the instructions as to how to work with this, and it said that I needed to use a wax brush, which I did not have on hand at the time that I was doing this. So the foam brush didn't work very well for this, but I still got the effect that I wanted. So I applied that wax and just wiped off the excess with a paper towel and let that dry. And these are ready to be displayed. I think this is such a beautiful finish to these and just a very simple project that you can do. I had picked up this small teacup and saucer probably 2 years ago, I want to say, when we were on one of our thrifting excursions, and I've just had it in my stash and I didn't really know what I wanted to do with it until now. I found these silicone molds on Amazon and I picked those up, and these are just smaller molds. And I have never worked with these before, so this was kind of a trial and error process for me. I put some cornstarch down in the bottom of my mold and just removed any of that excess by tapping on the back of the mold. And I also got this clay on Amazon, and I picked this one up because it said that it did not crack once it was dry. So we'll see if that works out very good for this project. And it took me probably 3 tries to get the look that I wanted from this mold. I need to do some more projects with clay just so I can figure out the method that works best for me. The clay was pretty dry, so I don't know if that's why I had a hard time with this. But I just kept working with that, and I did actually add a little bit of water and kind of re-kneaded that clay. But it just wasn't forming in that mold the way that I wanted it to. The design wasn't coming out crisp and clean like I wanted it, but I just kept playing around with it. And like I said, it took me about 3 tries before I got the look that I was happy with. And I just took my knife and kind of cut off any of that excess clay that I had from the mold. So, correction. One of the times that I did this, I cut off the excess with a knife, and then the third try, I actually just kind of peeled that off, the excess, with my fingers, and that worked a little bit better for me. And this was just easy to remove from that mold because I used that cornstarch. And I did use the tip of my knife just to get a little bit of that excess clay cut away from that design. Let me know if you guys work with clay, and let me know some of your tips for getting your designs to be nice and crisp in the way that you want them. And I went ahead and placed this down on my little teacup because I wanted that to dry in the shape of that cup, because I knew once it dried that if I tried to form that to that round surface that it would break and crack. And I have seen other crafters that will go ahead and glue their pieces on before it dries, but I did a little bit of research and it said sometimes that that would cause your clay piece to break off from whatever you had glued it to. As it dries, it may shrink, so I didn't want to risk that. And just to apply this to my teacup, once it was completely dry, I let this sit for 24 hours overnight, something like that. I just used my E6000 and my hot glue to attach that to the front of my teacup. And I did have a little gap in the sides of that, so I just went back behind that with some extra hot glue to make sure that was really secure. And I did want this to be one piece, so I glued my teacup to the saucer with some hot glue and E6000 as well, and just let that set up for a couple of hours. And I wanted to change the color of this so it would look like it was made this way and like that piece wasn't just attached as an afterthought. So I used my Waverly chalk paint in the color moss, and I did 2 coats of that. And to distress this piece a little bit, I took some of my Waverly chalk paint in the color white, and I found a wax and chalk brush that I had actually picked up. Of course, I didn't find that when I was working on the last project, but it worked really well just to distress this cup and saucer. So I just applied a light amount of that, and I just took my paper towel and removed any of that excess. I was afraid a baby wipe might pull up some of that paint, as I have had that happen before with projects like this. And I wanted this to be a little bit shiny, have a glossy finish. So I did add one coat of my glossy Mod Podge just to seal this and have it look a little bit shiny and actually like the finish that it had before I painted it. And I had high hopes for this next step, that it would be a little bit quicker and easier than what it actually was. So I'll show you what I did first, and then we'll go back and kind of have to reset and change the way that I was doing things here. I glued some of my polyfill into the bottom of my teacup, and then I just took a small piece of fabric, and I really wanted to be able to just kind of tuck this in around that polyfill, and that was not going to work at all, you guys. I don't know why I didn't think to do this the way I do it in just a minute first, but anyway, hindsight's 20/20, as they say. So I played around with this for a while and added some more of that polyfill, tried to get that fabric in there and tuck it in, trimmed off the edges, just wasted my time pretty much, but you live and learn, right? So you guys can learn from my mistakes, and hopefully I can save you a little bit of time as you are crafting and working on projects. So I had to pull out that polyfill fiber, which wasn't hard at all. It just removed from the bottom easily. And I cut a bigger piece of my fabric. And if you are a seamstress, you could probably sew these up in no time. I am not. I can sew straight lines, and that is about it. So I wanted to make a little pin cushion to have to go down in the top of my teacup. So the way I did that, I just put that polyfill in the center of my fabric, cut slits in each of the corners, pulled up one of those sections at a time of my fabric and just glued that to the polyfill. And I just continued that all the way around my fabric, and I just pulled that as tight as I could to get a nice snug fit around that polyfill so that it would fit into my teacup. And I didn't want my fabric to be loose. I wanted this to be a nice fitted pin cushion, if that makes sense. So it's looking like a nice little bundle there, and I just continue to pull up those other corners that I had and kind of folded in that excess fabric just to make that look nice and neat. Like I said, if you are a seamstress and you know an easier way to do this, by all means, go ahead and do that. This is just what worked for me the day that I was working on this project. And once I had each of those sections glued down, I did take some extra hot glue and glue some of those pieces that were not completely folded down, and I didn't like the way that those looked. And I learned that it's not very easy to wrap something with fabric and hot glue. Kind of looks like a little fabric dumpling, I think. What do you guys think? It's pretty cute. It's not perfect, but it works for this project. And I decided not to glue that down in my teacup because I might try to redo that or change out the fabric. But I just added that in there and kind of tucked it in. And I think it turned out so cute. And I added some of my granny's sewing pins that I have. And let me know what you guys think about this one. So I promised the best for last, so here we go. That's my opinion, I know, so you guys let me know in the comments what you think when we get finished with the video. I found this oil lamp at my local thrift store actually, and I love oil lamps. I kind of collect these. I have several on hand, and I actually have a few that are functional that we use when the power goes out sometimes. But I wanted to change this one up, and I absolutely love the base of this one. It has the bracket on there where you can hang this on the wall if you want to. So, to change this and make it look a little bit more farmhouse vintage, I painted the globe with one coat of my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster. And when you are painting glass, be sure that you don't go over the same area twice, as it usually will pull up some of that paint. So just a tip for you guys there. And I cleaned off the base, removed that bracket piece, and cleaned it as well. It was dusty and had some spider webs and things in there. And I grabbed my antique gold rub and buff, and I used one of my old dishcloths to apply this to the base of my oil lamp, and that worked really well for me. I usually use like a paintbrush or something and go back in with a paper towel, but I like this method a lot better. So I just rubbed that all over the surface of the base of this oil lamp. And I did leave some of those areas not completely covered with that rub and buff. I wanted this to look a little bit rusty. I wanted to change the look of it somewhat, but I wanted a little bit of that darker color to still be showing through. And I made sure to go over all of those brackets that hold the globe in place, as well as that piece that has the wick. And I had found these really pretty napkins last year at a store that is local here in my town. And I just removed all of the plies from two of these napkins. I thought I might need that many pieces to cover my globe, but I actually only used one. So you will just need one napkin if it's a larger napkin like this one. And I did mention that I removed all of the plies. There were two of them. You might want to think about leaving one of those plies on there because this napkin is very thin, and sometimes you can see the brush strokes that you have from your paint on a glass project. So if you left one of those plies, it might not show through like that. And I just used my globe to measure out what size I needed my napkin to be. And I decided to cut this into smaller strips. I thought that would be easier to work with since this is a round surface. I just cut my napkin down to maybe 1.5 to 2 inch strips, and I tried to keep them laid out in the order that they went on the napkin so I could get my design put back together and it would look cohesive. And I just took some of my matte Mod Podge and did a thin layer of that. I worked in sections with this as well so that Mod Podge wouldn't dry too quickly on me. Place my napkin on the bottom first and just smooth that down as I worked my way up to the top. And this does take a little bit of time because this is an odd shape since it's smaller at the top and wider at the bottom. You kind of just have to play around with the placement of your napkins and make sure that you're getting everything lined up and you don't have any gaps in your design. So just take your time and enjoy this process. And I also just used my paintbrush to help me apply those pieces as I was working my way around the globe. That just helped me get everything put down in place and kind of smoothed out some of the wrinkles and things like that. And once I had it completely covered and that Mod Podge had dried, I went back in and did another thin coat of Mod Podge just to seal everything down and protect my design. And as a finishing touch to my oil lamp, I added some fairy lights to the globe, And that bracket piece on the back where you could hang this on the wall, I just threaded those fairy lights through the hole there, and that helped to hold them in place and just filled my globe with these. And every time I work with fairy lights, you guys, I always get them tangled up. How about you? It's kind of frustrating. That happens to me every every time I'm working with them. And then just to put my battery pack on this, I took a glue dot and attached it to the bracket, and that just hides that in place. But this one is so pretty. I love this one, you guys. Let me know what you think about this. Is this something that you would do? I think this will be absolutely gorgeous in my home decor. That wraps up this edition of Thrift Flips. I hope you guys like these projects. I would love to know which one is your favorite. Let me know in the comments down below. And I would also love to know, do you go thrifting and what things do you look for when you are in your thrift stores? Please give this video a thumbs up. And I would love to connect with you on Facebook and Instagram. You can find those links in the description box. Please share this video as that helps my channel to grow. I hope you have a blessed day, and I will see you in the next one.